de Invesco. Sigue allí José Antonio Wigner, acompañado de otro gestor, en este caso, que gestiona el Euro Corporate Bond. Enseguida vamos a poder también acercarnos a las claves y bueno, si es el momento o no de renta fija, que es una de las principales preguntas que ahora mismo tenemos sobre la mesa con el escenario que tenemos. José Antonio, te cedo de nuevo la palabra y escuchamos atentamente.
Hemos dado un primer vistazo a un producto defensivo, 80% renta fija, 20% renta variable. Ahora queremos entrar en dos productos que también el inversor está mirando con este cambio de política monetaria, con esta subida de tipos de interés, que es un producto de renta fija corporativa europea, que es el Euro Corporate Bond, y también un producto de renta fija global, muy flexible, que puede ser parte de las carteras en este movimiento de rebalanceo cerca del final de año. El gestor de estos dos fondos es Julien Eberhardt. Thank you for having this time with us. Good morning, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
I am talking about this change is very important for fixed income. Is this move forward for central banks? What's your point of view in a global view about this move forward for central banks now?
Sure. Well, I think that at the moment, what's happening is mostly developed markets, central banks that are catching up with the fact that inflation has been higher and more persistent than expected. But we have seen in other parts of the world that some central banks had moved ahead of that, especially in some emerging market countries, where there we're probably approaching what we think is the peak in terms of the hiking cycle and in terms of inflation as well. So I think it's a catch-up from the developed market central banks here.
What's one of the options in one of these both funds is about European corporate bonds, I think high yield. What is options for investors now?
Sure. So if I think about the Euro Corporate Bond Fund, which is a fund that is designed to generate an income from a safer part of the corporate bond market, last year the yield of the fund was about 1%. Today the yield to maturity of the fund is 4.5%. So we've had a massive repricing that's been led by the repricing of government bonds that has in turn impacted some of the other parts of the market, such as the investment grade corporate bond market. But for us, we think that the levels where these bonds are trading now are a lot more attractive and are providing what we think is a good income opportunity for our clients.
Because this move forward for European Central Bank could affect all this investment in fixed income.
That's correct, and we've already seen the impact that it has had this year. But if we look at the pricing now in terms of the terminal rate in Europe, I think we are pricing in a terminal rate in Europe between 2.5% and 2.75%. At the beginning of this year, we were not pricing even a single hike in Europe. So I think that a lot has already been priced in. It's possible that it may go a bit further from that, but I would expect that as central banks progress, keep hiking, that financing conditions will get tighter, and this will have an impact on the economy. And at some stage, as we've seen in the past, they'll likely pause to observe the impact on the economy and how it develops.
This interest for European debt corporate could be defensive for this investor against the inflation in this moment and 2023?
Well, I think it just provides you now the difference between what we had in the past and what we have now is a good income that can help you buffer some of the potential further loss that you may have from government bond yields going higher. So I think this is the first thing. But you also have a bit of spread, which you didn't have before. So spreads have widened. And that's another way for you to actually get a bit of a cushion. So we could have government bond yields going higher, but a spread tightening as well in a certain scenario. So I think you have a bit of protection right now, which we didn't have last year in our portfolios.
If we change the point of view about a global, what's your allocation for this global total return bond?
Sure. So we started the year with a very defensive position. We had a lot of liquidity. About 70% of the fund was in liquid investments, cash and cash proxies, and we also had a very bearish view on duration. We had a very low duration in the portfolio. As the years progressed,
2 years more or less.
It was about 2 years. So we've positioned the duration of the fund historically between 2 and 8, and at the beginning of this year it was around 2. As the years progressed and we started to see government bond curves repricing, we've decided to bring this duration back up to what we think is a more neutral level, as we don't think it is prudent right now to be as bearish on duration as we were at the beginning of this year. And it's possible that over the coming weeks and months, we'll keep increasing the duration in the portfolio, as we think that we will at some stage approach the end of the hiking cycle in Europe and in the US. In terms of risk as well, we had very little risk in the portfolio, but there are some pockets of the market that we found very attractive and generates a very decent income. One is the subordinated bank market, where we can find, especially in AT1s, yields now between 7, 8, and 9%. We've also increased our exposure to emerging market local currency government bonds. As I explained, we like the fact that central banks have already normalized monetary policy and hike quite a lot, and we think that we are close to this cycle, the peak of this cycle, and inflation. We're monitoring this very, very closely, starting to come off in some of those markets. And lastly, we've also been adding to corporate hybrids in Europe. This market allows us to get exposure to very large corporates that have very large balance sheets and operate in very defensive sectors. I can think of the likes of Iberdrola, Telefónica, Vodafone, Total, where we can invest in the subordinated part of the capital structure and get some decent yields right now.
Why these companies here in Spain? For defensive.
Yeah, well, there are some companies, defensive in Spain. They're defensive because they operate in sectors like utility or telecommunications, where even if there is some price pressure or consumer confidence waning, we still expect people to want to get some energy, electricity, gas, and telephone as well. So.
And I understand, so regulated companies could be better in this change of, going to the end of the year.
Yes, well,
when they balance.
Yeah, I think it's just that you have more certainty on their cash flows given the regulation. So some of those utilities have networks that are regulated and where they make a certain amount of money, and that's fixed, and so you have great visibility on the cash flows. And for fixed income investors, that's very important because you want to get your coupon paid and you want to get your money paid back, your bond paid back at par. So that's very important.
Investor could be prepared for problems about bond government allocated in different parts of the world. In Europe, seeing the problems about Italy if there are problems with fragmentation.
Well,
and in other parts.
Sure. Well, it's always been a risk, and we saw that in the past. But I would say that there are some differences now between what we saw in 2018, for instance. So I know that we're going to have Italian elections this weekend, but the euro and Europe has not been a point of debate during those elections in Italy. Italy is a large beneficiary of the Next Generation EU funds as well, so there is some help, there is some fiscal help coming from Europe. And I think that's very important for Italy. And lastly, the European Central Bank has put in place a system, a mechanism that, true, has not been tested, but is meant to prevent any dislocation and fragmentation in government bond markets.
And outside Europe, there could be problems of debt level if there are problems with energy?
Yes, so energy clearly is a big issue right now, especially for Europe, given our dependence on Russia. For gas, but I think as we've seen, all European countries have put a plan in place to actually limit our energy usage. They have been importing more gas from Norway and LNG from the US and some countries in the Middle East in order to get the storage levels at very, very high levels for the winter. So I think, from that perspective, we should, it looks like be okay for this winter. And there has been some companies in some countries that have had to require a bailout because they got into trouble with the pricing of their contracts for energy, but we think that these are some isolated cases. And within our portfolio, we are very comfortable with the exposure that we have to the utility sector overall.
Do you think it's time now to fix the income rebalance for the investor now, or wait for the finish of the move forward for central banks until 2023, or it is time to rebalance 60-40?
Well, timing is always key for us, as you know, and it's not always easy to pick the exact date to invest. So the way we've approached that is we think that you have to look at the valuations right now, and if you think that they are already attractive, it's the time to actually deploy the capital if you were patient before. And we are doing this gradually, knowing that we may not be at the end, but we do have to start building those positions in riskier part of the markets and also increasing the duration. And again, I would say that what we have right now versus what we had in the past is that we have a bit of income that can help cushion any further weakness in our markets.
Thank you very much, Julien Eberhardt, dos de los fondos clave ahora mismo que está mirando el mercado en renta fija corporativa europea, ese Euro Corporate Bond y ese Global Total Return Bond, que es renta fija más global y flexible. Thank you for having this time with us. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
And good luck for 2023.
Thank you. It's needed.
Marta, desde aquí, desde Invesco, este vistazo a la renta fija en este momento en el que el inversor está mirando de qué manera al fin de año puede rebalancear y puede mover sus carteras.
Gracias, José Antonio Widmer. Gracias también a los gestores de Invesco que te han estado acompañando. Muy interesantes los mensajes que nos han dejado y, de hecho, citando algunas de las palabras de Julien Eberhardt, gestor de fondos, como nos decía José Antonio, el Euro Corporate Bond y también el Global Total Return Bond, en este caso bastante flexible. Citaba algunas empresas defensivas, ha sido bastante curioso. Entre las empresas españolas que ha citado ha hablado de Iberdrola y de Telefónica, ha hablado evidentemente del impacto que está teniendo la crisis energética ahora también en las perspectivas de cara a los países europeos. Decía, bueno, algunos quizás necesiten un rescate, hablaba de la palabra bailout, directamente lo ha pronunciado así que bueno, nos quedamos con un entorno